My head longs for the noose as Mission 7 starts off with Nimbus delivering one of the cringiest lines of all time in the following cutscene.
Systems are late, with 80% of defenses now operational. I'm full of fury, she's got an army, and you got magic green strings. Let's crush this Callus guy.
We aren't ready for Callus. We don't even understand this erratic power at a foundational level.
It's time we figure it out. Keitel, we'll need your troops. Nimbus, charge up as many of the remaining turrets as you can, while Osiris helps me to untangle this strand.
When we think about controlling something powerful, it's easy to assume it takes strength. Determination. A force of will. But what I've learned is that we cannot control every facet of nature. Instead of tightening our grip, we must open our palms, accepting the ebb and the flow. Letting go in the face of grief in all its shapes. Through failure, through loss, we can overcome the impossible.
It starts off with us beaming down onto some location on New Muna. Due to the lack of an establishing shot or recognizable background, I'm not exactly sure where this is. Since I'm walking after Osiris and Keitel, it's probably safe to assume that we're at the watchtower. Our heads turn towards the audible zipping noise in the sky. Long before we see Nimbus, we hear him coming. Presumably for the style points, instead of landing like we normally see him do, he decides to grind his hoverboard through a groove in the building before landing dramatically. Since Rohan can't use his, I think it would only be fair if we got a skyboard. At least until the New Munian Council is able to find a new cloud creator to fill his vacancy. After landing, Nimbus lets us know that the systems are lit, and 80% of the defenses are now operational. He doesn't mention what systems, but I assume it's referring to the Cloud Arc as a whole, mainly because he specifically mentions 80% in relation to the defense systems. I would like to know what exactly these defense systems have even been doing this entire time, because they don't seem to have relieved any stress when it comes to our duties of preventing Callus from destroying the Veil. This is where Nimbus says the line I warned of. We do indeed have magic green strings, but as we just discovered, the previous mission stress tested the reliability of this power. Our failure is what led to Nimbus proclaiming themselves as being full of fury. Their tone doesn't indicate this, but they could just be maintaining their typical presentation for a multitude of reasons. While any reason, from along the lines of they've accepted Rohan's death already, or that they don't want us to worry about them, justifies why they acted this way, it doesn't stop the actual words they said from being embarrassing. I guess the problem is that while I don't exactly expect this event to have caused any immediate change, their inability to read the room caused them to say something cringeworthy, which is annoying. In that regard, this does at least maintain consistency with Nimbus's character. It's just that this character trait is not a good one, and perhaps it should have changed through some character development. The scene moves on to Osiris, explaining how we are not ready for Callus. We don't even understand this erratic power, which I assume is Strand, at a foundational level. I feel like you don't need to understand something at its foundational level to use it. Like, I know how to use my phone to look at Twitter, but I don't know about the specifics of any of the engineering behind it. This is when our character says it's time to figure it out. I'm glad that Mission 7 of 8 in this campaign is when our character decides to speak and decides to actually start doing something. We should have said this line after Mission 3 when Callus went AFK. Also, it's not like we haven't tried to understand these powers. That's all Osiris has been doing in the Watchtower this entire time. We also went to the Cloudstrider meditation location in order to train with Strand and advance our knowledge in Mission 5. Were we not trying to figure out Strand during that training session? We move on. Keidel's troops are something we need, but for what, in particular, is not specified. Yes, the troops are likely for a battle or siege on Callus, but I want to know where and how. We relegate Nimbus to charging up some turrets, while Osiris and I will be focused on Strand. With the way our character came in and said this, through a basic first impression, it seems like we're working on getting stuff done. But all of these are what each of us have already been working on. We realize that Nimbus is useless in more ways than one, and getting only 80% of the defense systems back online is a terrible job. They need to get back to working on restoring the rest of the defense systems. Keidel can just continue to vibe, I guess. Osiris and I will continue with our training. I'm glad that Callus just decides to not bother us by doing his job so often. The go with the flow analogy to explain Strand is not that great in my opinion. It never goes into any detail of how this helps us control Strand and stays vague the entire time. Like, do the loose motions of our body help guide the strings better? Or does relaxing our mind allow us to control more of the strands? I'm not asking for the entire unified theory on the physics of Strand. I just need one or two details in order to help explain how our training is helping us instead of just being told that we're getting better through some illusory means. Moving past the story implications, I also have no idea how it relates to the themes of darkness as a whole. Going with the flow conceptually seems to belong more to the light in philosophy, and Strand, in theory, seems all about control. That might be why there's this whole introduction of going with the flow, but that only brings me back to pointing out how it's never explained how this theory helps us control Strand any better. Maximizing control does make sense in relation to the darkness though. To bring it back, Nimbus's cheery tone might act as a mask, but since what he presents is all we get when it's combined with an equally cheesy 80s training montage, the overall tone leaves me with the taste of annoyance, especially since this is happening right after the death of Rohan. His death should have impacted something in the story some way, preferably through Nimbus's character shifting, as they are the only ones who shared a connection. However, since Nimbus still presents themselves as the same, it diminishes the impact of Rohan's death, as all it did was buy some time, which feels weak narratively. It also seems slightly disrespectful to Rohan as a character, or at least what little of one he had. The mission officially begins once the cutscene ends.
We stand at a precipice, both in our conflict with Callus and in our training with Strand.
But something is still missing.
And we will find it together. Perhaps inspiration will strike where we least expect it. Follow wherever Strand leads you. Let's experiment.
From our introductory dialogue, it seems like our current goal, according to Osiris, is to simply go on a walk, in the hopes of inspiration striking. Our ghost is far more helpful in this regard, as they direct us towards a Strand source in Amsa Park instead. This lack of an instruction by Osiris expands on his character though. It took me until now, but I finally understand what he's been up to this entire time while he's huddled himself up in the Watchtower. Before we get to anything else, while Osiris ponders out loud, I do so as well. This relates to the mission structure, but I don't have any grand point to make around it, so I just wanted to say that this entire campaign should have been structured with us arriving at New Mina in the first mission and us working our way down to the bottom floor of the Veil containment zone. Just an idea I had, and so you had to hear me say it. Just cuz.
Shadow Legion ahead.
No doubt preparing for a siege. We must take this time to prepare as well. The battle will be ours soon, but now is not the time. We have never struggled harder against a greater evil, and yet we know now what Nimbus taught us. All products of the mind are conjoined in the darkness. Our obstacles and our goals are all contained within. In fact, they are the same. The same as us, the same as our enemies. What if, in trying to master this power, in trying to take control of this conflict, we've been swimming against the river's current?
Would certainly explain the exhaustion.
The question remains, how do you flow with the river?
Upon arriving at Anza Park, we take note of the encroaching Shadow Legion. Osiris realizes that they are probably preparing for yet another siege, and thus we have some time. Shout out Calus. Osiris mentions how this has been our most difficult struggle against an enemy. I assume that he's not talking about Calus for the obvious reasons. This would mean that I think he's referring to the Witness. In this case, the sidestep of Calus means that Osiris doesn't actually regard Calus as a threat, which would also explain why he hasn't been the most pressed when it comes to being proactive outside of learning Strand. If Osiris isn't worried about Calus, then I'm not either. Savathun really was that much superior, so his standards are pretty high. This dismissal of Calus is kind of funny, but also pretty sad, because he's the big bad guy of this campaign, but the story doesn't even consider him an actual threat. To me, this indicates that the focus of the story shouldn't be on Strand directly, which is why the Veil and Strand exist. In the case of Strand, unless it's the power that will directly help us stop the Witness, it probably shouldn't be the main focus for the penultimate campaign in this 10-year saga. The Veil being proposed as the dark version of the Traveler is instead how this campaign will maintain relevance and have stake to the main story. Calus aligned himself with the Witness, but since the Witness is the final antagonist and has to be saved for the next expansion, Calus can only be so much of a threat, especially since he's been thwarted before. So the campaign focuses on us trying to stop Calus from destroying the Veil with some Strand on the side. Now that I've reverse engineered the structure of the campaign and why I think the events have unfolded the way they have, I can say that this isn't a problem. In fact, if we walk through the first 3 missions, this is exactly what happened. We landed in New Mina, gathered some information, and then stopped Calus from destroying the Veil. The problem stems from after that. Things slowed down for 2 missions and pick back up when Calus tries to destroy the Veil with the radial mast again. And now, we're going to waste some time training again. And after that, Calus is going to attack the Veil again. There is no progression in the story's A-plot, and the player cannot feel the progression of Strand in the story's B-plot. Showcasing the world building of the Veil was neat, but I don't even know what it is, so not exploring it first feels like a distraction considering the circumstances. We are literally and figuratively running in circles, accomplishing nothing, which makes everything feel like a waste of time regardless of the actual events occurring. Osiris then continues on to say that we now know what Nimbus taught us. All products of the mind are conjoined in the darkness. I have no idea when or how Nimbus could have been the one to impart this knowledge onto us, but if they were, it was almost certainly accidental. I feel like I should have been there for such a profound revelation, unless this is Osiris reframing his coming to a conclusion based on Nimbus saying dumb, which sparked an eureka moment for him. Our obstacles and our goals are all contained within. In fact, they are the same as us, the same as our enemies. I have not even the slightest clue what Osiris meant by this. What are our obstacles and goals contained within? What is the same? This vague posting is nonsensical. even in the best case scenario. Of course, he can't drop the whole go with the flow metaphor, and thus he's brought it back to us swimming against the river's current. Apparently, Osiris decided to join a 2016 prog metalcore band. Argos entertains Osiris by agreeing that this would explain the exhaustion, but I have no idea what he's talking about. This metaphor about the theory behind Strand is worthless to me as a player because I haven't done any of this mental exploration myself. I've just been shooting bad guys, like usual. Osiris spewing verbal diarrhea from behind his mask doesn't make the story profound just because he says it does.
There, more Strand.
Yes, and Vex nearby. A fine time to put our theories into practice.
We find the Strand energy source, and Osiris wants us to put his theories into practice. Of course, I have not even the smallest of iotas on what those theories even are. The gameplay just consists of us using more Strand, which is fun, but the same as it's always been. Without having to touch anything else, I think the easiest fix to this issue at this point in the story is to just grant the player a temporary Strand exotic effect in order to augment the Strand gameplay. This way, Strand will function mostly the same, but there will be a major shakeup in how you apply it during gameplay.
These harpies, there's 2 different types. Is there a pattern we need to find?
And what comes as a major shock to me, there is actually a puzzle attached with the harpies. If we take a look above at the Vex gate, there are 3 crystals. The first and last are charged. If we examine the harpies, there are anion and cation versions. Cats are positive as they make you smile, and onions make you cry, thus are negative. If we destroy the harpies in the displayed order, we can walk on through.
Brute force yields little progress, while careful execution paves a path towards a greater power.
Rohan would have said, headlong and empty-handed.
Perhaps our towering friend understood more about this power than even he knew.
Osiris says some nonsense about not relying on brute force in relation to mastering Strand, but the words said are completely pointless. Argos quotes Rohan, but I never recognized headlong and empty-handed as his catchphrase. Although, to be fair, if he said it once out of the 2 times we talked to him, that's a pretty high rate. I have no interest in figuring out how it relates to whatever Osiris is discussing, because this is some baseless post-hoc character healing.
Think on it. When did you start seeing true success with Strand?
When we helped the Neomuni by rebooting the power station. What did that have to do with Strand?
Our perspective changed, as did our approach to fighting our battle. We took a step back, saw the broader whole, and moved in keeping with it.
So what? We flow with the river by planning better?
By seeing our obstacles as part of the bigger picture, and using the bigger picture to overcome them.
No, our perspective did not change after that mission. The problem with platitudes is that they terminate thoughts. There is nothing here for me to discuss or analyze because all the words said don't have any actual meaning behind them. They were just constructed to sound like they have one. In any case, we solved the next Vex gate. Osiris and Ghost say that we've changed, but I have no idea what that change is since it isn't represented. I know the previous Greater Strand concentration granted me an aspect, but its effect was so irrelevant I didn't mention it. This time around, it's no different. These additions to our gameplay loop are far too simple. They need to have much broader gameplay changes in order to be meaningful development in relation to the narrative.
Excellent! That was excellent!
We're really onto something here, huh? What changed?
To properly observe phenomena of the light, one needs the right instruments.
And for darkness?
One needs the right perspective. I think we've found it. Seek out more Strand and see what this new perspective offers.
Blah blah blah, perspective shift, blah blah blah. Osiris wants us to prove our mettle. It's so silly that we're on mission 7 out of 8 in the penultimate campaign, and we're just having a silly little Uwu training arc. Like, did the writers forget that the witness is carving their way into the Traveler in this very moment? I have a problem with their vague non-philosophy behind Strand. But in a vacuum, what we're doing is fine. Everything just feels too relaxed, which is because we don't have a focus outside of stopping Calus, nor some sort of time crunch or pressure. In the previous campaign, our goal the entire time was to figure out what Savathun was up to. Every mission built upon that core idea. Once we learned that Savathun stole the light and was trying to steal the Traveler away, the time crunch to stop her, before she completed her ritual, placed a phantasmagorical pressure upon our shoulders. If we failed, we would have lost our light and died to the witness when they arrived. I don't know what Calus is doing, and while I can understand why Osiris is focused on Strand, I'm concerned with why no one else, Keitel, is concerned. Calus failed at destroying the Veil, and instead of attacking him while he's down, we're just waiting for him to launch his third siege against the Veil. Comical.
Even after all that, it seems the Guardian's energy is still stable. Is it possible the perspective shift was all we were missing?
Do not underestimate this moment. This is the product of humbling training, many failures, and your determination. But you've not mastered this power until you can bring these lessons to bear under duress.
I think I know where this is going.
I have a challenge for you. The VexNet contains many pockets used for testing new subroutines. There is one very near you. Perfect to discover what you can really do with this power.
We find ourselves traversing through the radio sonde a second time. The VexNet realizes that we don't have Strand and creates a rather convenient platform outside for us to jump on in order to get through. On a revisit, not having more Strand swinging platforming sections was one of the largest gameplay failures. The following Vex Harpy Gate puzzle finally introduced a bit of difficulty. I have to shoot 5 Harpies in the correct order, but these Harpies have upgraded their numbers and defenses. So, in a closed room with minimal cover, I needed to not die while hitting multiple shots into the same enemies while they move, all in the correct order. It's that while they move part that made this more troublesome than it otherwise proved. After solving it, I entered the VexNet.
This is it, Guardian. Remember,
Flow with the river.
well, what are you waiting for?
Osiris set up a training program in order to test our abilities in the VexNet. Somehow. Sure, I guess I'll just accept this. In any case, this section was why I mentioned the fact that there was a noticeable lack in Strand singing sections, for sure. Swinging sections. We finally get one, but it's tragically short. The location is neat, but it's apparent that the blue and green texture work are what sells the look of the VexNet.
Good. This flexibility is unmatched. Now, show your fighting prowess.
The combat arena is a cylindrical room with a massive pillar in the center. Yes, I did skip over most of the swinging section. It's fairly standard and basic, unfortunately. There is no mechanic for this encounter though. Instead, there's a rotating red death matrix wall attached to the central pillar, which I guess you could consider the mechanic. So, look, I'm losing. Look, this mission is making me lose it. This forces us to stay on the move, whether that be by our feet on the ground or the Strand in the air. There were a few close calls, though those were either caused by the snipers that spawned in the corners of the room, or by me swinging directly into the enemies. This constant forced movement actually recreated some of that Strand flow described by Osiris. It's just a shame that this section was short and not difficult at all.
Impressive.
I bet we could go again. What do you think, Guardian?
I hate to butt in on your enlightenment, but Shadow Legion are on the move.
Another time then. You've more than proven yourself. Calus has no idea what's in store for him.
The Shadow Legion cut our already short training session even shorter. I suppose having a breather before the final encounter is nice, in theory, but I would have had to ignore reality in order to accept this. in this case. I'm sure you don't need me to repeat myself any further as this mission ends. For some reason, I skipped the intermission this time around. I don't remember why, but if I had to take a guess, right now, I probably just thought that they were a waste of time, and so I immediately decided to begin the final quest.